Welcome to the Gospel Road. We're going to look at John 19. It says, Then Pilate took Jesus and flogged him, and the soldiers twisted a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and arrayed him in a purple robe. Then came up to him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews, and struck him with their hands. Pilate went out again and said to them, See, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no guilt in him. So Jesus came out, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, Behold the man. When the chief of priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, Crucify him! Crucify him! Pilate said to them, Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him. The Jews answered him, We have a law, and according to the law he ought to die, because he has made himself the Son of God. When Pilate heard this statement, he was afraid even more. He entered his quarters again and said to Jesus, Where are you from? But Jesus gave him no answer. So Pilate said to him, You will not speak to me. Do you not know that I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you? Jesus answered him, You would have no authority over me at all, unless it had been given to you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin. From then on, Pilate sought to release him. But the Jews cried out, If you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar. So when Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at the place called the Stone of Pavement, and in Aramaic Golgotha. Now, it was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about the 6th hour. He said to the Jews, Behold your king. They cried out, Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him! Pilate said to them, Shall I crucify your king? The chief priests answered, We have no king but Caesar. So he delivered him over to them to be crucified. So they took Jesus and went out bearing his own cross to the place called the Place of the Skull, which in Aramaic is Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him two others, one on either side, and Jesus between them. Pilate, who also wrote an inscription, put it on the cross. It read, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Many of the Jews read this inscription, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and is written in Aramaic, in Latin, and in Greek. So the chief priests of the Jews said to Pilate, Do not write the King of the Jews, but rather the man said, I am King of the Jews. Pilate answered, What I have written, I have written. When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his garments and divided them into 4 parts, and at one point each soldier also his tunic. But the tunic was seamless, woven in one place from top to bottom. So they said to one another, Let us not tear it, but cast lots for it to see who shall it be. This was to fulfill the scripture which says, They divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. So the soldier did these things. But standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, Woman, behold your son. Then he said to the disciple, Behold your mother. And from that hour the disciple took her to his own home. After this, Jesus, knowing that all was now finished, said to fulfill Scripture, I thirst. A jar full of sour wine stood there. So they put a sponge full of sour wine on the hyssop branch and held it to his mouth. Where Jesus received the sour wine, he said, It is finished. He bowed his head and gave up his soul. Since it was the day of preparation, and so that the bodies would not remain on the cross on the Sabbath, for the Sabbath was a high day, the Jews asked Pilate that his legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. So the soldiers came and broke his legs of the first, and the other who had been crucified. But when they came to Jesus, they saw that he was already dead. They did not break his legs, but one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and at once there came out blood and water. He who saw this, it was borne witness. The testimony is true. He says that his telling the truth, that you also may believe. For these things took place that in Scripture might be fulfilled. Not one of my bones will be broken. And again, another Scripture says, they will look on him whom they have pierced. After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, who was disciple of Jesus, but secretly for fear of the Jews, asked that Pilate take him away the body of Jesus, and Pilate gave him permission. So he came and took away his body. Nicodemus also, who earlier had come to Jesus by night, came bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, and 75 pounds in weight. So they took the body of Jesus and bound it in linen with the spices, as is the burial custom of the Jews. Now was the place where he was crucified. There was the garden, and in the garden a new tomb, in which no one had been laid. So, because of the Jewish day of preparation, since the tomb was close at hand, they laid Jesus there. John 19, crucifixion of Christ. How do we treat others? Let me think about that for a second. Do we crucify them? Not in that detail, but on how we treat them. They talk about Christ and him not being accepted by his own, but are there people that you work with, family, friends, that for whatever reason you are holding something against them, some sort of grudge, something that causes you to treat them poorly, having poor thoughts about them? I was watching a movie last weekend with friends, and they were talking to the character, and they asked him that if he had any friends, and he said, well, he's kind of quiet, kind of keeps to himself, very awkward around people. But then people annoy him. Or not the people, but he annoys people. Because of his mannerisms and what he does, he is an annoyance to them. And I thought about that for a second, and it kind of really rung home to me, because I know for me, I get it. The business that I'm in and what I'm doing, and even doing this, I can be very awkward when it comes to people. I am awkward when I go to events. I'm awkward when I go to different things, even family gatherings. I can be the person quiet, sitting in the corner, maybe playing on my phone, checking email, whatever it is, because I do not always mingle well. Awkward with that. Now, there's times that I can really work through that and do fine, because I've had friends that say, really, we don't notice that. Well, I know I have a job, and I know there's things that I need to do, and I do that. But also, because of my awkwardness and I step out, at times I can be annoying. I can be very annoying. And sometimes it just can make it an interesting conversation, a interesting integration in a crowd. But when that happens, when you're dealing with people, when you have someone like that around, are you holding that against them to where you do not like them because of that situation, because of who they are, because of how they act? In some ways, behind their back, you're saying things about them. I've heard about things that have been said about me behind my back, that I'm not a nice person, that I am hard to work with, or that I can really fly off the handle very easily and get mad and get upset, which I'm sure at times I can. And I'm sure there's been times in my life that I did that more often than I do now. But then it's funny, I'll end up talking to people and end up having conversations with them, or actually having a event or work with them, and they go, well, you're nothing like what people say about you, which is interesting. People will come up with this predetermined idea about a person. This even happened to me where I work, that I was laid off years ago during a downsize, and then I was brought back because they were needing a part-timer, and I've been back ever since. But once coming back, I had to have the conversation about gossip and about, going around and talking behind people's back and things like that, which then leads me to believe I was let go because this is what they thought about me. They thought I was part of some big clique, which then a couple years later, after being there, I went to talk to the powers that be for, the possibility of a couple other jobs. And so the comment was made to me about knowing what's going on around the business, the company, around the building. And I just looked at them and I said, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, they're like, well, you seem to be in the know. You know what's going on. And I say, no, I really have no idea. I talk to coworkers. I have conversations with them. I mean, we see these people on a fairly regular basis. So there needs to be some sort of camaraderie. There needs to be a conversation there. Kind of that work friend, There is going to be some sort of relationship. And it was not one but two, and they both made the same comment to me. And when I said it back to say, well, no, I really have no idea what's going on. People aren't coming to me to gossip, and I'm not looking to find out things of what's going on here. They were surprised. Which was interesting, because then it sits there and makes me wonder, what is it that you think about me? What are my mannerisms? Who am I talking to that you assume this is how I am? And a lot of times, that's what it is. They're assuming. So Christ comes, the Jews completely freak out about him because of what he's saying, and especially when it comes to the priests and those that know better, and he's kind of saying, look, you're doing this wrong. And they don't like to be corrected. They're being the child, not wanting to be given his due for doing wrong. They're not wanting to, take their punishment. Not that he was punishing them, but he was going, guys, what are you doing? Now, this isn't right. You need to not take advantage of your people. You need to love them. You need to take care of them. You need to have compassion. And that turned into them wanting him to die, wanting him to be crucified because they couldn't deal with that. So the same goes when you're dealing with friends and people and those at work, when they are acting and talking a certain way, and maybe what they're doing is something that kind of freaks you out. I mean, I've also been on the end where, I'm not one to go after anybody's job. I go and I do my thing and I go. I do the best I can. Am I fantastic at it? Yeah, I'm okay. Mediocre. Do my best. Try to be better. Do my best to be better. Listen and watch other things to learn, to try and be better. But I am not one to say, look, I see that person and I want their job. I had a guy twice try to get me fired from my job because I don't know why. Was I after his job? Well, even his brain, if he was assuming, he wasn't assuming very well. Our job is to be there for one another, to build up each other, to love one another, to help others be better people. That's our job. And it's not sitting there and nitpicking and finding everything that we can find wrong about a person. Not sitting there and bad-mouthing or trying to, make a person look bad because what they're doing or how they're acting. Not saying that it's wrong, but it's not something that you understand or something you like. Again, we're all different. And we all still have to live together. We need to get along. It says in the Bible to live in harmony, to be there for each other. And it doesn't matter what you believe or who you are or what you've done. We do that. We take care of each other. And that's what we should do, is take care of one another. John chapter 19 is what we looked at this morning. So read it. What does it say? How does it speak to you? Thank you for listening to the Gospel Road. Have a great day. God bless.